Welcome to another episode of Let's Talk Quality, the podcast. My name is Hamish Alangaratne, and since 2023, I've been interviewing some of the most talented and well-respected quality leaders in the pharma and biotech industry to learn how they got to where they are now. This season is all about our guests and their journeys. Why they got into science, how they got into quality, their biggest challenges and greatest learns, and the highs and lows along the way. Every week, I'll be bringing you a new guest with the purpose of inspiring the next generation of quality leaders. Welcome to Season 2. I hope you enjoy the show. Welcome to another episode of Let's Talk Quality. Today, I'm joined by Jon Voss. Jon is a seasoned quality professional. Over the last decade or so, has served as a head of quality from VP to EVP for a range of different companies, ranging from sort of Sarepta, Generation Bio, Selectis, and most recently Abeona. Jon, welcome to the show. Pleasure to have you on.
Thank you, Hamish. It's I look forward to the day we finally actually get to meet in person and have a drink together. I don't know when that'll be. Good.
I know that we've got some mutual friends that would be good to grab a drink and go for some dinner with. But Jon, no, thank you for joining.
Thank you.
There's a lot to get through in this conversation, and I'm looking forward to it. But I've given you a very, very sort of high-level intro, but if you could give the listeners
Sure.
an introduction of who you are and a bit about your background, that'd be great.
Sure. Well, just to start off, you said you introduced me as a seasoned quality professional. That, of course, translates into an old man quality professional. So I may be, I definitely have been around. My educational background is Bachelor of Science in Physiology from University of California, and a master's in biomedical engineering from Boston University. From BU, Boston University, I went straight into the pharma industry, and basically for the most of my career, all but one little exception, I've been in the pharma industry in one form or another. I started off, oddly enough, coding software for early bioreactor control systems that at that time didn't exist in the form that we have them now. So I was actually working with a team at Genetics Institute using the original IBM PC, which was long before most of the viewers of this podcast are even familiar, I'm sure. But I stayed in the industry. So I started in biologics at Genetics Institute, then to Amgen and BioPure, and then did my one exception, and it's an interestingly odd exception, is at one point I spun off and started up a software company for the pharmaceutical industry.
Okay.
And I built that and ran that for about 3 years and finally sold that company and went back into the industry working for Genzyme, where I worked for about 10 or 11 years. Happily, a lot of that was spent in Europe, in Belgium. I spent 5 years as an expat in Belgium, starting up a new mAb facility in northern Belgium. Repatriated back in 2007, I think it was. Came back to Boston, where I headed up a division of corporate quality for Genzyme, and took several different roles in Genzyme before the buyout occurred with Sanofi. Left Sanofi at the time of the buyout. That's when I started really branching off my career into different avenues. So after Genzyme, I went to work in small molecules because I had never done that before at Lonza. From Lonza, after that division folded, I went to do something I thought was really unique and different, and I went to work for a medical device combination product company and learned a lot about the medical device industry. That resulted in a commercialized product as well. And then that's when that led me to Sarepta, as you were mentioning, Hemish, and a very enjoyable part of my career. About 4.5 years at Sarepta, starting from a basically no quality department to, I think when I left, we had about, I had QA, QC, and clinical quality and analytical development. I think we had about 75 people. That resulted in the approval, not that didn't result in, but that during that period of time, we commercialized Exondys, the first oligonucleotide approved treatment for Duchenne muscular dystrophy. Um, After that success, I wanted to do something different. I went to a very small startup, a 20-person startup called Generation Bio, working on closed-end DNA. And then I got the call of sort of the dream job call. I got a call from a Paris-based company called Selectus, and they offered me a position to head up their growing quality organization, with the requirement that I be forced, I put air quotes, forced to work out of their Paris office 50% of the time. So another expat trip, this time to Paris, an amazingly fun, enjoyable experience, not just living in Paris, but the people and the culture and learning another language, and really enjoyed that. Returned due to COVID from Selectus and was going to retire, and ended up working with a really fun group of people at Abeona Therapeutics. And that was an autologous cell therapy, whereas Selectus was allogeneic. And that led me to ultimately semi-retire as a consultant primarily now, and how you and I met, actually.
Absolutely, yeah. And it's been
sorry for that long tirade.
Well, no. As you say, it's a long career. It deserves a long intro. Let's there's a lot to unpick there. I suppose I'd like to ask about because you almost ahead of your time back in the day, because a lot of people would work for a company for 15, 20 years and stay at that company up until maybe, in the last decade or so that trend has probably changed, or even more recently. But you went from, obviously, you started in sort of larger pharma with, was it Amgen or genetic Amgen? Then went into different roles, and you did 10 years at Genzyme. And then since Genzyme, you've done a few different organizations sort of between 2011 and 2020. So what a lot of people back in the day would think that let's stay at a company and then stick at that company. I say back in the day, it's only 10 years or so ago. But what was your thought process, and why did you move, and what benefit has that had?
It's a good question, and I have a lot of thoughts about it. And when I have interviewed at different companies, that is a question that I frequently get asked, which is along the lines of, gee, you've worked at a lot of different companies. Why so many changes? And to me personally, and this isn't for everybody, I enjoy learning new technology. And so large molecules I had done at Amgen Genetics Institute and Genzyme for many years. I was very familiar with them. Gene therapy hadn't really taken off at that point. So I wanted to do something different and learn a new set of skills, new technology. And many people think small molecules isn't that exciting, but I learned a tremendous amount working at Lonza for the short time that I was there. A large molecule person doesn't even understand or doesn't come across dissolution testing and some of the unique analytical aspects of large molecules. the formulation process is extremely complex and involved. And so the short answer to the question is, I do it or did it because either I got bored. That's usually a negative thing to say, but I wanted to branch out and learn something new: medical device, small molecule, ultimately gene therapy in multiple forms, oligos, DNA, mRNA, AAV vectors, and CAR T, and most recently at Abeona, the autologous cell therapy is really fascinating. So for me, almost all of my changes correspond or relate to a technological bent where I wanted to explore something and learn something new that I hadn't had before. And honestly, one of my points, I wrote down a few notes as we were thinking about preparing for this meeting.
Yeah.
And I think not only is there a technological advantage to having exposure and experience working with all the different modalities of our technology that exists in the pharma space, but I believe also strongly in the idea that every time you make a change, it's an exponential improvement in some ways, in that when you leave a company, you tend to take the good stuff with you because you know it's bad. There's always something that you didn't like or care for, or that you learned that was negative, and you take that good experience and you tend to apply it to the next situation that you can. And I think I'll use an example. I mean, Eli Lilly is a classic example of a company that people, are kind of go cradle to grave at Lilly in Indianapolis. And I think I used to work with a lot of Lilly, Pharmacia, Upjohn, the older companies in Merck in New Jersey. And I think over time, those companies have witnessed and experienced that there tends to be a very what's the word I'm looking for? Closed. People all share the same set of experiences and values, and new ideas. New ideas are a little bit harder to get traction. And when in the smaller companies that we experience now, so many of them are virtual and or very small. The ability to apply the experience and learnings that you've had from past jobs, past work experiences, I think can be a very tremendously valuable asset to a company and to a person.
Yeah, I mean, this is like contracting, consulting.
Yeah,
you're
right.
getting a lot of different exposure into different
Absolutely.
technologies, modalities in a relatively short space of time. But the experience that you bring into each company is, it's exponential as you develop. And like you say, that the companies where it is a bit cradle to grave, you do lack sometimes, or could potentially lack that diversity in thoughts and ideas. Do you think that's benefited you in the as you've gone into the latter stages of your career?
Yeah, I know it has. For example, in a current project I'm working on, I thought initially that the project was primarily a biologic product, until I realized that it had a medical device component, and that medical device history that I had from my previous work was tremendously valuable in helping to assess different quality issues and understand the quality issues that arise from that, and the regulatory aspects, and most importantly, I think. And that's the kind of example that I think of. And I'm sure there are plenty of negatives too that I naturally am glossing over, but I think it's a really strong point, and I encourage people to constantly be looking at new opportunities and new things that are exciting to them. If you're having fun and learning new things, then that's great. Keep doing that until you stop learning and growing.
Yeah, definitely. So let's I ask everyone this about sort of the evolution of quality assurance as time has gone on. In your eyes, how have things developed or evolved with specific focus on quality as
Sure.
a market?
Well, it certainly has changed a lot in my lifetime. And I think in the earlier days, and maybe this is slanted a little bit because in the earlier days I was less experienced, and so maybe it felt different. But in the earlier days, we weren't focused as much, we were focused more on compliance than we were with what I think of today as being the really important aspects of quality. So the simple answer to that, in some ways, is, and I think about this a great deal, is the safety of the patient is the most critical thing. And it's easy to say, and we all know intuitively that's the case. But when I'm faced with a quality decision or someone says, what do we need to do in this case? I always go back, and I think this is where years of experience helps, because as you get more experience, you gain more confidence, just simply because you've had more successes with things like approvals and audits and inspections and things like that. But it's when I'm trying to answer a question and in a quality issue, I'm always focused on trying to evaluate not whether or not the documentation is correct and compliant and all the I's are dotted and the T's are crossed. I'm trying to figure out if the problem that we're dealing with could impact a patient from a safety perspective. And that's how now I root everything that I think about. And what that means is I let go a lot of things that I used to think were important, but I realized over the years really aren't. The agency doesn't shut us down, or the agencies don't shut us down because we forgot to initial and date a batch record in a particular place. They may make a comment and an observation, possibly, but that's not the important aspect. It really has to come down to, if it's an injectable, is it sterile? Is it efficacious? Are the impurities within the accepted limits? The things that really could hurt a patient. And I always, because Duchenne et Sarepta is a early childhood disease, I always tried to think of it in the context of children. Would I give this to my child? Would I be worried about the health and safety and well-being of a patient? And that, if I can keep that in my mind as I'm making decisions, it makes it so much easier to deal with the quality issues. And you started this with, how has quality changed or evolved over time? And I think we talk a lot about phase appropriate quality, and that is also something that I personally am very interested in and dedicated sort of to trying to ensure that the decisions I make are appropriate for the phase of quality. And I'll give an example that may be easy to relate to for others. So almost all of us are using CDMOs for a lot of our manufacturing. And recently I was involved with a fairly large CDMO for a phase 1A product that they were, a clinical product that they were going to manufacture for us. And the nature of their quality system was so rigid and so tied to what I think of as commercial quality, meaning that every form had to be signed in advance. You couldn't use email to transmit an okay to proceed. You had to fill out 5 forms, and they had to be routed through an electronic system. And the decisions they were making, or the requirements and requests that they were saying, they wanted every assay fully validated. And and the answer was no, that's not required, and we're not going to pay you to do that. We don't need that now. And if you don't keep that in mind, the phase appropriate part, you'll put so much quality into an early phase product that it'll never make it to the market. And the time involved in getting that product fully validated, commercially ready for a phase 1A or even phase 1B, 2A type product is going to kill the company and kill the product. And I think we as quality people have to keep that in mind as to what is the end goal. I want a product that's safe. I want to get it into the clinic as soon as practically possible, while maintaining that level of patient safety and quality. So I do think it's changed, but we're very slow to evolve as a species, the quality professional. I think it's really easy to fall back on this. The easy answer is no, you can't do that. And I want 5 signatures and 5 forms filled out and everything, when in reality, that's not necessary. And in fact, I would say that it indicates a lack of understanding of what really is important.
It's a really well. You've explained that really well in terms of the evolution of quality. Why is that though? Why do you think that is that a thought process that you've just developed as you've matured in quality, as you've gone through your career, in terms of switching it from just a tick box compliance aspect towards a more patient centric approach? Is that a reflection of society, the industry, or is that just?
I think it's more of a reflection of the whiskey I was drinking at night. No, it's sorry for the sarcasm. I think it's just comes from seeing so many products that don't make it to market because of well-intentioned people that just don't understand what is the absolute requirement versus what they want to see for a requirement. So for me, it's something, it took me a good long time, I think, to sort of evolve to that state. Unfortunately or fortunately, that's, everyone says as you get older, if you could have only somehow been born with the knowledge that you have, you would have been such a better person, such a smarter person. And that's where I kind of hope that people that are watching podcasts like yours, Hamish, are able to sort of see that and learn from it, and realize that there are ways to think of quality that are different than you might naturally tend to gravitate towards, which is the easier way to do quality, is to just say no and make things super black and white and strict and restrictive. I think that's important. And if I can branch off for just another second, I also think that quality people are very afraid of technology in general. They're afraid of software. They are afraid of Excel even. And of course, that's because of validation and those requirements. But even the agency has softened and backed off on requirements for technology that it realized it was impeding the evolution of both manufacturing and quality. I've recently been using software tools that I never would have imagined were possible 10 years ago, let alone maybe 5 years ago, that speed up the way I review batch records. They automatically scan and extract data and help me find situations where calibration dates are out of alignment with the production dates, or deviations that occurred but didn't get documented in the batch record. And previously, I would have been scared to death of such software, and it even some of these use AI at this point, and it's coming. I think I'm a big fan of technology of all forms, but certainly of computers and software. And I think the next 10 years will see vast changes in the way quality is performed using AI and software and technology like that.
Are there any particular? I mean, there are a lot of skills that people need to be developing around AI, around software. Have you personally invested in learning more about that side of technology?
I have, simply because I like to code myself, and I've always been involved to a degree in software development activities. So for me, I have attended a couple of seminars hosted by MIT, local to me in Boston, on AI technology, not for the pharma industry specifically. I haven't seen. I guess I have seen conference seminars that are beginning to include AI as a topic. Even some of the QMS, the electronic QMS systems, are beginning to just scratch that little bit of technology. I do think that the validation of that is more of a challenge, but it shouldn't be the reason you don't do something. If it works, it can be validated, is always something I've felt very strongly about. If you can show that something, piece of software, that whether it's a LIMS or an ERP system, or even things as broad as Oracle and SAP, they can all be validated in one way that matches the basic need of the user. And the agencies are much more open to that now than they used to be back in the early 2000s. I hate to date myself, but
well, let's. I wanted to touch on some of the commercial approvals that you've been through. And you mentioned Sarepta there. So you were at Sarepta from 2014 to 2018 as Vice President of Quality and Site General Manager. So, and in that time, Exondys.
Yes.
Was that the first FDA approved treatment for DMD?
It was the first. Essentially, yes. It was the first oligo gene therapy approach. And
first gene therapy,
yeah. It was that approval was very controversial in the industry, both from the patient side, the agency side. If I'm not mistaken, I think there was a movie made about it, or I may be mixing that up with Genzyme's Henry Tamir story. I think I am. The Exondys approval had to go to an advisory committee, which was very politically and scientifically interesting. I was a relatively silent observer at that AdCom. I was there more for moral support, as it didn't involve me directly as much. But witnessing the controversy of the agency's approval process for something that had, many people would say, challenging data set to prove efficacy, was a very strong learning experience for me, and made me appreciate especially the analytical side that plays probably the most prominent role in the approval of almost all all drugs. I was fortunate enough to have an amazingly brilliant head of QC work with me, and he just not only educated me a lot in the technology, the analytical tools, mass spec, etc. He was just a really a good guy, and still remains a good close friend.
Can you give us a little snapshot, I suppose, into that part of your career, and with a focus on the lead up to that commercialization and the systems and processes you had to get in place from late phase clinical into that commercial setting?
Yeah.
How it felt.
Yeah, it was really interesting because the agency we were using a key assay that was involved in that approval was a Western blot. And for those who know analytical chemistry, Western blot is a very manually intensive, some would argue highly variable analytical technique. And a lot of the approval was related to that, and there were politics and there were political arguments about that, and scientific arguments about the Western blot assay. Perhaps the most interesting story about that was just prior to approval, after we had submitted and we knew we were headed towards an AdCom, the agency said that they wanted to watch in person the performance of that assay. And that was being done at the time at a facility that we were shutting down in Oregon. And we tried to convince the agency that it wasn't possible to do what they wanted to do. They wanted to send out 4 inspectors to a small clinical, not a clinical, well, at that time, yes, clinical laboratory, and watch people perform this assay in person, because at least my assumption at the time was they didn't trust us. They didn't trust the data. And our data was quite good, and we were quite proud of it. But we were shutting it down. The people were going to be leaving. The equipment was moving to Cambridge, and the agency still insisted. So we flew out, and I can remember greeting the inspectors at the time, and the poor technicians they're chemists, obviously biochemists, and they knew it was like walking into a room knowing the president's going to come in and shake your hand and watch you do something you know you can't make a single mistake, and it's a finicky assay to begin with. The manipulations are very precise, and we were really nervous that just having the agency watching would create deviations and anomalies in the data. And we did get through it, and they eventually left and took a massive amount of data with them, and seemed okay with it afterwards. I think, the big thing, and maybe this is more to the question that you were asking, before we got approval, so we were still clinical, quality was much like everyone is used to experiencing it. We had all of the systems in place. We had all of our validation work complete. But once we got to commercial, at least for me, as a quality person, the learning challenges decrease, meaning commercial, you're just trying to produce the same product the same way every day, every batch. You want to be the same. That's the goal. That's what we should be achieving. Mm-hmm. And I find that performing the quality function in a commercial organization like that is less challenging than doing it pre-commercial. And I personally enjoy small companies that are going through the approval process, submitting their INDs and ultimately their BLAs. And I enjoy the process of interacting with the agencies through the both written and verbal meetings. It's a different type of quality once you get commercial, and I won't say it's boring, because there's unfortunately plenty of examples of problems that occur and drift in a process, and there are improvements that are made. But I know for me, once a product is commercialized, I'm immediately looking for the next sort of shiny apple to look at.
Yeah. What advice would you give to heads of quality leaders that are in that position? It might be a late phase company going into pivotal trials for their first commercially approved product.
Sure.
What advice would you give them?
Well, I think it depends on where you are in your career. If I personally, and I'm sure there are lots of people that will disagree, I think once you're commercial, the technical challenges are decrease, and things become more routine, as they should and are supposed to. And if you're early in your career, earlier certainly than I was, um, I think it's a good thing to consider whether or not that's what you want to keep doing, and whether hopefully you have other products that are in clinical trials and moving up, so you can focus on those. But if it was your primary product and you're not going to get a new product for a couple of years, to me, that would be something that would make me start questioning whether or not I wanted to look at something else. And if you're later in your career, maybe you want that. Maybe just having the ability to relax and improve, sort of do continuous improvement, is what you want and need to sort of satisfy your own drive and ambition and need. That's how I look at it. I'm sure there's 50 different ways.
No, absolutely. It's interesting. What I suppose when you look back at things now, Jon, you've been, I know you're consulting now, and you've had some amazing achievements over the years. What do you look back at and think, or see as something that you're most proud of in your career?
Well, oddly enough, one of the things was that little blip where I went off and created my own software company, in that not so much, it wasn't incredibly financially successful, but if I hadn't done it, I know I would have always regretted not doing it. So in one way, that's the easiest thing to answer. The other thing that I really enjoyed, and I think is a real thing to consider for especially younger or people still getting started in their career, is I did a lot of public speaking and attending. So I joined PDA and ISPE, started up the Boston area chapter of the ISPE, and that led to a number of opportunities and exposure that I think are really important for people. That is not something that a lot of people want to do, or think they should do, or think they can do. So I had an opportunity at my first opportunity to speak came from the ISPE, speaking in the early days of computer validation, and I was extremely nervous, and I joined Toastmasters actually as a way to learn to speak with more confidence. And one of the things when I left Amgen that I've had a lot of feedback from my former employees was, as a personal development goal, I encouraged all of my staff I said, I will give you extra sort of bonus points in your performance review if you join Toastmasters and you give a speech. And ultimately, Amgen developed its own Toastmasters club internal to the company. And I've had more people over the years thank me for doing that than anything that was really quality related. But I do think that writing papers, publishing, speaking exposes people to, again, more people and opportunities. It shows your interest in contributing to our quality data set that we all draw upon, and I think that's a great way to improve yourself and your career opportunities is to speak. I ultimately became a faculty member of the PDA at their Training Research Institute and taught cleaning validation, computer validation, and several other courses there. And not only did I enjoy it, but it definitely helped my career in different ways, more on the soft side than the hard side, I guess.
It's interesting. It's thank you for sharing all of that. It's unique advice and stuff that I've not particularly heard too many people say about the importance of public speaking and developing that aspect of your skills and development. I didn't know that Amgen invested in that.
Yeah,
stuff so heavily, but it's brilliant. Yeah. Jon, it's been a fascinating conversation. I've really enjoyed it, learning about your insights and your career and the achievements and your outlook on quality and how it's evolved and where it's going. Finishing off with a few quick fire questions.
Okay.
First question: What are the three most important values that you live and die by?
The top one is humble. Being humble, I think, is extremely important. I've said it before, and this perhaps doesn't match the 1, 2, 3, but focusing on safety and focusing on simplicity. Instead of writing a 20-page report, write the abstract first, and then have something that you can hand someone easily. I think is also really important. Is keep it simple. Is I think really important.
Very good. Do you believe in leaving a legacy?
I've never thought of that. I don't really think of it, to be perfectly honest. I think I think I'm humble. I try to be humble, and that's almost the antithesis of it. To be thinking of it from a legacy perspective, only perhaps in terms of my grandchildren, and hopefully, or that they won't follow in my footsteps. They'll go off and do something really great and contributory to the world.
Excellent. Who's been the biggest inspiration in your life, and it can be either professionally or personally?
Well, let's see. I'll if I may, I'll do two, because one I'll do professionally. I think that really good friend of mine from Sarepta that I mentioned earlier, Uditha de Alvis, is I think he's an inspiration to me, taught me so much about analytics. I think on the professional side, he's incredible, and on the personal side as well. On the personal side, that's tough. My kids. It's a lousy answer, but my kids and my wife.
No, it's a good answer. Final question. What one piece of advice would you give to future quality leaders?
I think it's really important to think carefully about the quality problem that you're trying to solve before you solve it, and what is driving the problem, as opposed to it's really easy to jump into a solution and say, well, we need a Kappa plan and a detailed timeline for how to solve this, as opposed to just simply saying, could I do this in a much easier way with just a quick meeting with the two people, get an agreement, understand what their position is, and walk out of that meeting with something that benefits the patient and the company. I don't think that was a great answer, but that's what comes to mind.
Sounds pretty good to me, Jon. Jon, thank you so much for your time. It's been a great episode.
Thank you, Hamish.
As always, it's a pleasure. And you never know. Before I'm hoping this will be released in the next few weeks, but you never know. We might meet in person before then.
That would be great.
But no, Jon. Thank you so much for coming on. I think it's been a great episode, and I think a lot of people will take a lot of practical advice and be inspired by your journey in quality, your career journey, and what you've achieved. So I really appreciate you coming on the show.
Keyword there is seasoned, right?
Seasoned. Replace
what?
Seasoned, aka old, as you put it.
Perfect.
Jon, great to see you. Catch up with you soon.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you for listening to today's show. I hope that you got value from it, whether you're starting your career in quality or if you're at the top of your field. Today's episode was brought to you by RX Group. I'm the founder of RX Group. We are a pharma and biotech recruitment organization focusing purely on quality assurance. We recruit consultants and senior level permanent quality professionals into the pharma and biotech industry. If we can support you, whether that be in a hiring capacity or if you yourself are looking for work, please get in touch with me on LinkedIn, visit our LinkedIn page where you can subscribe to the podcast, and visit our website, www.rx-group.io, to find out more about us. See you soon.